The John Lewis Voting Rights Act and Freedom to Vote Act have stalled in Congress for months. But the Senate Democrats, they are pushing to advance those bills through an unconventional means. The NASA bill, that bill's already passed the House. The measure would extend the space agency's authority to lease its property. Now, if you're asking yourself what that all means, I'm trying to get that too, and why it's connected to voting rights. Lawmakers are using the bill as a placeholder to reignite the discussion over voting legislation. All right, I need more answers on that. So here to help us break down the voting rights fight and public showdown, we're joined by Congressman Bryon. We're also joined by Charles Williams, Pastor Charles Williams, better yet. He's the president and the pastor of the National Action Network of Michigan. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Congressman, explain to us exactly this unconventional measure, because I don't get it, and I'm sure some of the viewers don't either.
Well, essentially what happened last night is that House Democrats decided to use the bill that was supposed to be for NASA's leasing ability of lands, and they used that essentially as the vehicle to drop in elements of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, H.R. 4, and of H.R. 1, the For the People Act. And they pulled out some provisions. They left the bulk of most of the stuff they wanted in both bills, and they put that in this NASA bill. The NASA bill is going to go to the Senate. The House voted it out today. It's going to go to the Senate. And the Senate, although one of the procedural hurdles is clear, there is still going to need to have 60 votes in the Senate in order to pass that bill, in order to get rid of cloture so it can go to an up or down vote in the Senate. What Joe Biden and the Democrats want right now is to actually have Senate Democrats essentially ignore the filibuster rules so that the bill passes by a simple majority.
All right, Pastor, how are you keeping your folks invigorated as we prepare to go into midterms this year with everything that's happening?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's very difficult. I mean, look, there's a significant challenge throughout the country, to our democracy. Started January 6th, but we know that it was happening way before then. There are too many people who get turned away from polls because they don't have ID. Too many Secretary of States and too many county clerks that are playing games with absentee ballots and drop boxes, and too many legislatures that are putting together voter suppression bills across the country. And so I think people are very clear about what's happening from Obama to present. Even when Obama got elected in 8 and 12, he even mentioned that we've got to do something about it. And quite honestly, John Lewis left us a legacy, and that legacy is voting rights, marching from Selma to Montgomery, serving in the United States Congress. I think good trouble is something that everybody's willing to get in to make sure that we get voting rights here in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Marching and also being beaten while doing that as well. I want to play some sound for both of you. A major part of the Democrats' push is to get rid of the filibusters, or so that's what's being said. Arizona's Democratic Senator Kristen Sinema weighed in. I want us to listen to this.
I support these bills because they strengthen Americans' access to the ballot box, and they better ensure that Americans' votes are counted fairly. It is through elections that Americans make their voices heard, select their representatives, and guide the future of our countries and our community. These bills help treat the symptoms of the disease, but they do not fully address the disease itself. And while I continue to support these bills, I will not support separate actions that worsen the underlying disease of division infecting our country.
All right, now, she said that right before that meeting. Congressman, I want to get your reaction first.
Well, first of all, I will tell you, Senator Sinema is correct when it comes to the filibuster in the United States Senate. The Senate is a very different body. It is not a pure majority-driven body. You have to get a quote close to a supermajority support in the Senate to move legislation. That has been the way the Senate has operated since the beginning of the Republic. If you get rid of the filibuster in the Senate, then the federal government becomes, frankly, a pure democracy, which is actually not what the federal government was ever designed to be. So she's correct in that. Now, specifically to the voting rights bills, what Democrats, if they really want to fix quote unquote voting rights, they need to go do this state by state. Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution is clear that time, place, and manner when it comes to elections is to be decided by state legislatures, not the federal government. And so it is wrong to push these bills through at the federal level and basically create a one-size-fits-all rule across the United States. Listen, Florida has the best election law in the country. I voted on Florida's election law several times when I was in the state legislature. We have rampant ability for people to be able to vote and exercise their choices, regardless of their race, regardless of their political affiliation. And that's the rule in Florida. It's easier to vote in my home state than it is in the state of Delaware, the president's home state. So if they wanted to do something substantial for voting rights, they should look at some of these other states that don't have rules that are actually similar to Florida, where it's very easy for people all across the political spectrum to vote.
All right, Pastor, what do you say to that?
Look, I'm first of all, if maintaining the filibuster was that important, I think the old Mr. Smith goes to Washington style filibuster would probably be very important to implement right about now. Quite honestly, no senator or congressional representative wants to work that hard where they actually have to sit up there and speak until they fall out because they spend a lot of time going to fundraisers. But that aside, I mean, let's just be honest here. Look, the Republicans will talk about the purity of the sanctity of our bylaws and the things that we do and we've done so long. And if the shoe was on the other foot, they would have done it 6 months ago. This happens all the time. Quite honestly, where Democrats play the soft shoe game, and we're going to see if we can work it, and then the Republicans take the knife and just dag it right into them. I think, quite honestly, Democrats needed to do this 6 months ago. They should have did it a long time ago, the minute they knew that they didn't have the vote. And with the argument that we don't need voting rights, well, the issue is, let's be very clear here. State legislatures are actually being gerrymandered so tough that there are very one-sided bills coming out that are basically voter suppression bills. They know they don't want black, brown people coming out to vote, because if they come out to vote, they definitely won't vote on the side of the conservative or the Republicans.
Yeah. Congressman, a question that a lot of folks are asking is basically, you all came together to raise the debt ceiling with no issue. Well, you came together. That was the bottom line, right? Are Republicans stonewalling voting rights at this point?
Well, first of all, the answer is no. If anything, who's stonewalling these bills in the Senate is Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, because they don't want to blow up the filibuster for obvious reasons, because it would destroy the very institution of the Senate. And I would let everybody understand that the Senate goes back and forth just like the House does. So the people who are in charge right now who want to blow up the filibuster are the same people during the last administration, when the Republicans controlled the Senate, who were defending the filibuster. So I think it's important for people to remember and understand the full history here in Congress, that the filibuster's been around for a very long time. It's been defended by both parties when both parties have been in a minority position. Its job is to defend the rights of the minority in our republic. We are not a pure democracy. Second point I will make is this. When it comes to actual voting rights, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is still in place. It's still the law of the land. The portion of the Voting Rights Act that is not active right now is Section 5, which is pre-clearance. The reason why the Section 5 pre-clearance provisions are no longer active is because those were the strategies put in place in the Voting Rights Act that would cause those counties that were quote unquote pre-clearance counties that were clearly discriminating against Black people to make sure that if they made any changes to their election law, they had to be approved by the federal government. When the Supreme Court struck down pre-clearance, they did an exhaustive study, and it was clear that there were no issues with respect to disenfranchising Black voters in the last 2 decades in the United States. So that is why pre-clearance is no longer active.
Congressman, I want to ask you one last question, because we are running out of
Yes.
time. I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir. Would you support reinstating that pre-clearance?
No, I don't, because there's no data to justify anywhere in any jurisdiction in the United States that Black voters are being disenfranchised systematically, which was the purpose of pre-clearance when it was passed in 1965.
But wouldn't that be the same for voter fraud as well, sir?
No, because under voter fraud, if somebody has a federal rights action for fraud, they can bring that anytime they want to. That is still the law. That's in the law that still is in existence. You can still bring those cases, but what we're saying is that you cannot have your rules dictated by the federal government.
Now,
That's what pre-clearance does.
yeah, I'm talking about the laws that were just put into place by several GOP states, sir. That's what I was talking
And I
about.
will tell you, those laws do not violate the 65 Voting Rights Act. If they did, then people who disagree can bring a federal cause of action. But the reason why they won't bring a federal cause of action is because those laws actually make it easier for people to acquire ballots and to vote them.
All right, gentlemen, we are out of time. Congressman Bryon Donalds, thank you, sir, for stopping by to talk with us. Pastor Charles Williams, you're staying with us for the next block so we can continue the conversation. Thank you. All right, as you can see and hear, so much is at stake in the upcoming election that could determine the way America is headed. We're now going to BNC's Derek Lewis. He is live in Houston with more on that and what's inspiring folks out there